Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Bungay. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingsheim with Seymour Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. This week, we're happy to have join us Michael Bungay Stanier, who is recognized as one of the top coaches, executive coaches in the world. He wrote a best-selling book entitled The Coaching Habit, which has sold over 1 million copies. It's the best-selling coaching book of the century. And he has written a new book entitled How to Begin. And we're going to be talking about some of the principles from that book. And he's going to share just some thoughts that I know you'll enjoy. Looking forward to our conversation today with Michael. And it's great to have Michael joining us for our conversation.
Look, I'm very happy to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me along. I'm excited to tell you what it just takes to be motivated to lead.
Yeah, great. Well, a lot of our listeners are new or up-and-coming leaders, and I like to ask this question of almost every guest, and we'll kind of kick off the podcast with this, but knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself at the age of 22?
Well, 22, I was midway through university. I didn't know much really at all. In fact, I thought I knew a lot more about leadership than I actually did because I was leading teams and leading committees and stuff, but I still had another 4 years of university to go. So honestly, I'd be saying, keep enjoying yourself. For me, one of the glories of the 20s is it's just a time to figure stuff out. And you have all these theories about who you are and what you will do and who you'll be when you grow up. And who knows if any of that is true. So I think at 22, the call to arms, the call to action is have some adventures. Go figure out, go to the edges of who you are and test things out, because almost certainly the thing that you're planning is not going to be the thing that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I saw your TEDx talk about how to tame your advice monster. My wife thought that was a great one for me to watch. So, but I definitely, and I read your book, and this is actually one that it's sold a few copies, over 1 million now.
It has.
The Coaching Habit, and so that dealt with some of the topic in that book. So I encourage everybody to pick that up. But I thought that was. You're a great communicator, and I really enjoyed that topic and trying to apply that in my own life. So
yeah, honestly, because I know this is for new leaders or leaders committed to grow, and in some ways, I'm now in my mid-50s. I still feel like I'm figuring out this leadership thing. It is hard. Like I'm flawless. Everybody else is a disaster. How do I meet that? So,
sure.
But if I've learned one thing as a leader, it's like the power of curiosity is a power indeed. It's not only a way of helping you figure out what's worth focusing on, but it's also a way of how do I bring out the very best of the people I'm working with. And taming your advice monster, that TEDx talk is one version of doing that. But so much of this is like, if there's one singular behavior I'd encourage as leaders, it's can you stay curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving just a little bit more slowly?
Yeah, that's great advice. I picked up your new book, which came out just at the beginning of this month. So it's still hot off the press.
It is hot off the press. Exactly. I can see the steam rising on the screen as you're holding it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you run a company, a Box of Crayons. You've had great success as an author, and as a coach, you were selected as one of the top executive coaches in the world. So you've got a lot on your plate, and I found this book really interesting. Just the timing. I'm sure that wasn't by accident at the start of the year when everybody's thinking about goals and setting goals. But talk a little bit about kind of the new book and kind of set the table. How do you pick the goals that you've set out to accomplish?
Yeah, Mark, this wasn't the book I had thought I was writing when I set out to write it. This is This kind of corresponds to what advice would I give a 20-year-old? It's like, honestly, it's the advice I'd give a 55-year-old, which is start, because it's probably not going to finish the way you think it's going to finish, but you need to start to get going on it. And it turned out that I was writing a book on goal setting. Who knew? I didn't know that when I started it, but as I worked my way through a series of pretty terrible drafts of this book, I realized there was one phrase in particular that I thought was particularly powerful and resonant and aspirational for me. We unlock our greatness by working on the hard things. So I was like, okay, if that's a truth, and it feels true to me. It feels like I've seen the best versions of myself emerge when I'm up against it and I'm learning and I'm struggling a bit and I'm not drowning, but I'm having to work to figure stuff out and stay where I am. How do I help people figure out what the hard things are that they want to do? Not only so that they can do work that matters, but so they can unlock the best version of themselves. And so it made me go back and look at goals, and I'm like, okay, well, SMART goals everybody's heard of, and everybody kind of takes it as an orthodoxy. You should have SMART goals. I was like, a SMART goal is good. Does that actually work? Because when I think back on my career, I'm like, I've never loved the whole idea of SMART goals. I found that they've actually let the air out of the tire. It feels like they become smaller and shrunking, and sure, they're more measurable and they're more specific, but they're not more exciting. They're not more engaging. And I thought, well, okay, so SMART goals don't really work for me. What else is out there? Well, Jim Collins came up with the phrase BHAG. Now, BHAG stands for big, hairy, audacious goal, which is a nice phrase. BHAG's a pretty ugly acronym, but sure, we'll go with it. But for most people, BHAGs I feel like they're more organizational goals rather than a personal goal. So I'm like, how do I set goals that unlock and connect to people's ambitions for themselves and for the world? And so the idea of the worthy goal emerged. And I think it has three strands to it. It needs to be thrilling, important, and daunting. Thrilling, lights you up, gets you excited, makes you rub your hands together and go, oh, I'm up for this. I'm pretty excited about it. Important in that it gives more to the world than it takes. It connects to the bigger picture. It has a through line to something more than just your own sense of happiness and worthiness. And then daunting is, does it take you to the edge of who you are? Does it stretch your sense of competence and confidence? Does it make you figure out new connections that you hadn't made before? Does it unlock your greatness? And I reckon if you can work and rework a goal so it's thrilling and important and daunting, you're onto something pretty interesting.
And you have a little diagram in your book that has kind of the center of those three is kind of the sweet spot of discovering that. And I was just reading an article saying that 80% of the people that started out with New Year's resolutions January 1, by the second week of February, it's basically toast. Do you think it's because they haven't thought through as far as kind of
there's a bunch of I've seen all those articles about the disappointment of New Year's goals, and I've heard they call January the 19th quitting day, because Strava, which is an athletics app, kind of go, that's when people who've gone to the gym for 18 days stop going to the gym and stop going for runs and the like. And the other thing that's an insult to injury is your credit card bill arrives around about then as well. So now you're paying for the holidays and you've given up on your dreams. So it's a bit miserable. I do think that in some ways it's because our New Year's resolutions, we inherit them. And we often haven't figured out how they're thrilling. I mean, I want to lose 10 pounds. There aren't many people who go, well, that's exciting. They're important. Well, some people can make connections to important. And daunting is like, I don't even know how to start with that. Or I've done it before and I've tried and I've failed and I'm a bit demoralized about that. So I think, first of all, framing your goals, thrilling, important, and daunting is really helpful. And then I do think there's a process to actually examine your goals and figure out, look, am I really up for this? Am I really willing to commit to this as a goal? Because most of the time, and this definitely happens with New Year's goals and resolutions, we come up with a goal, we don't poke it, we don't interrogate it. It's just the first thing we thought of. Sometimes, we thought of it 10 seconds ago and we're holding a glass of champagne because it's midnight somewhere. And we don't really ask ourselves, am I really up for it? What would it take for me to fully commit to this as a goal? If you do that, then you've got a much better chance of following through on your goals.
So take me through. You give some examples of some goals that you have that you've set, and I see some of them are have started already in your podcast and some of the things that you're doing. But talk a little bit about that, kind of the maybe an example of that as far as in your own life and the filters you took.
So you mentioned that I run a training company. Well, actually, I don't anymore. I founded a training company called Box of Crayons, and a couple of years ago, I stepped away from being the CEO of that. And that was a hard process because if you're a founder, you've got a whole bunch of ego and entanglement in the company that you start. It's hard to give that up. There are some bits you're really excited about giving up, but it's hard just to give the whole thing up. So I went through this process to figure out how to stop being the CEO and allow Shannon Minifee, who's the CEO now, to really take this on properly. And when I first wrote down the goal, it was a really simple goal. It's like, stop being the CEO at Box of Crayons. I was like, yeah, that's good. I like it. But then I went, all right, well, how thrilling is that? I don't know, maybe 5 out of 7. How important is that? Well, that I knew 7 out of 7, because I knew that I wasn't that great a CEO. And I was going to have to, for Box of Crayons to continue to thrive and grow, I had to step out of that CEO role because it was diminishing for Box of Crayons. And it also didn't play to my strengths. Like I'm a better book writer than I am a CEO. And how daunting was stopping being CEO? Actually, not very daunting. All I have to do is walk away. Just say to Shannon, you're the CEO now. I'm done. That's not daunting at all. It just wouldn't be successful. Shannon would fail. I'd be dragged back. It would have been a mess. So one of the key insights of the book, Mark, is to say, look, you want to draft and redraft your worthy goal. So you've got a real confidence that you're close to something that really matters to you, that it has intrinsic and extrinsic motivation for you. So that goal went from stop being the CEO to participate in a generous and gracious handing over of power, which is the same basic outcome. It would look the same basically from the outside, but internally made all the difference, because actually handing over power is something that I really care about, and kind of a lot of my work is around how do you empower other people. Important we already talked about. And then daunting, I was like, that is hard. That is hard to do that in a way that is gracious, that gets me out of something, that stops me meddling, that sets Shannon up for success. And it was going through that process and really continue. And, I went through 3 or 4 drafts of that worthy goal before I landed on something that just made me go, that's it. That's the thing I'm working towards now. But then set up my ability to act on that goal.
And I think part of the issue I know for myself is you try to get it all figured out in the first draft. You try to get it all, everything buttoned up, and it's supposed to look perfect. But that first draft, you say, just get started on it.
Yeah, it's a paradox really, which is like a really great way to start is with a crappy first draft. Mm-hmm. And to make the point even more, it's like, and you need to assume that your first draft is always a bit crappy. Hemingway said it is like, the first draft is always shit. And then other people have said it and resaid it in different ways, from Annie Lamont to Brené Brown to whoever else. You got to assume that your first draft is an excellent start, and it's also pretty crappy at the same time. And it's in the working and the reworking that the magic happens.
So that next part of it, committing. Talk a little bit about that, the process that you go through.
Yeah. When you come to a place where you're like, I think I've found this worthy goal, I think I like what I've got, the natural thing is just to start acting on it. You're like, why wouldn't I? Let me get going. I'm excited. I've named it. What's the first thing I do? And we've all just been in that situation where we've set ourselves a goal and we're like, this feels important to do. And then for some reason you resist it and you can't get going on it, and you ignore it and you avoid it and you step around it. And you're like, what's going on with that? Well, I think what's going on with that level of resistance and avoiding, which is 100% natural. It's actually how you know you're onto something interesting, is when you can feel the resistance.
Sure.
You need to face two choices, because you have two choices. This is a very Star Wars / Yoda moment. There is no try. There's only do and not do. That's what you're up at the moment. Do I do this or do I not do it? And we don't often say this, but if you name your worthy goal, you then have a choice to say, am I going to do this or am I not going to do it? And they're both valid choices. If you say, as a thought experiment, what if I didn't do this? I've named it, I can see it, I can taste it, I'm excited about it, but I'm choosing to walk away from it. The question I want you to ask is, so what are the prizes and punishments of that decision? What are the advantages to you walking away from it? But what's the price you and others pay from you walking away from it? The advantages are pretty clear. You maintain the status quo. You don't upset your relationships, your expectations. You don't risk money or time spent or opportunity costs. You just maintain things as they are. But, the cost of you not taking it on is significant as well, which is like that impact that you want, thrilling, important, and daunting. You don't get that. And also we don't get it because there's a ripple effect. We miss out on you taking this on and making the world a little bit better. And then I think you ask the same question if you're like, what if I imagine I was really committing to this? I'm really going for it. What would I get from that? Imagine all the benefits from taking on a worthy goal. But what's at risk? Because you can't deny that things aren't at risk. If you take on a worthy goal, things are going to change, and there's always risk in change. And these questions force you to kind of really go, am I up for it? Or am I more committed to the status quo than I realize? And that's what often is uncovered here, which is like, I'm seeing some commitments to the way things are that I didn't realize that I had.
It's good. And I love the idea around, I've heard you talk about it, the 6-week sprint.
Yes.
And I think sometimes people get this big goal in mind, but they don't break it down into chunks where they can actually make some progress and figure out if this really is a worthy goal. Talk a little bit about that.
Part of the discipline of the 6-week sprint, Mark, and this is what I use with my team, and we have a little membership site called The Conspiracy where we run people through 6-week sprints so they can make progress on a project that matters to them. When you're taking on a worthy goal, thrilling, important, and daunting, you don't actually know how to do it. You know how to start it, but actually, because it's daunting, it's on the edge of your competence and your experience and your knowledge. You're feeling your way into it a little bit. And it makes it ludicrous to kind of create a 9-month plan or a 2-year plan to kind of deliver this, because you just don't know what you're going to learn or how the goal is going to evolve or change, or what barriers you are going to encounter or what accelerants are you going to encounter. So 6 weeks gives you enough time to say, I can work hard on this for 6 weeks and see what progress I make. And it's like, I imagine you kind of make a choice. So I think I can do this in 6 weeks, head down, do the work. And after 6 weeks, you come up and you go, all right, where am I now?
Right.
Now, what's my worthy goal? How does it look in this light and on this hill? And what's the next thing that would emerge? And you need a bit of time to kind of reset and recalibrate. And then you set up for the next 6-week sprint. And I reckon if you can do, 6-week sprints in a year on a worthy goal, you're going to have made really interesting progress.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I think that's something doable for anybody. I think everybody can say, okay, I can do this for 6 weeks, and then learn.
Here's what I'd say around that, Mark, which is it is doable for anybody, and this stuff is hard to do by yourself. And one of the chapters in the book, there are basically 3 sections in the book. You've talked about 2 of them: set a worthy goal and commit. The third one, which we're kind of moving on to, is how do you cross the threshold? How do you make progress on this? And each section has 3 chapters, 3 kind of key core insights. And one of the insights around crossing the threshold is you just can't travel alone. You have to do this with other people. You have to kind of have people who are brave and loving, smart and ambitious around you who can kind of help you keep tracking forward. Because of course, in theory, you can work in 6 weeks, but setting up a worthy goal means that you're wrestling with something that has resistance, that is both inspiring and difficult for you. And it's very easy to collude with yourself to opt out of a worthy goal. And when you have people around you, you're just more likely to go the distance.
That whole crossing the threshold, and you mentioned that sometimes people just look at the end result, but you talk about that's important, but also doing the work and enjoying the work and the process of the work is also. Otherwise, we always are chasing that next thing.
Yeah, well, it's one of the kind of amazing paradoxes of science, which is if we spend too much time focusing and obsessing and kind of visualizing the outcome, the successful achievement of the goal, we lose motivation to actually work towards that. It's part of the genius of our brain that it doesn't entirely know the difference between reality and imagination. And if we overthink and over kind of wallow in what the success looks like, our brain goes, it looks like you kind of got this. You should just, relax. You're there. You've done it already. You can see it so clearly. It's like you're there. And actually, having articulated and seen the goal, now you kind of want to be thinking about, well, what's the gap between where I am now and where I need to get to? And what do I think I can do in the next 6 weeks to close that gap? And now, you come back to the phrase that started this and is at the heart of the book. We unlock our greatness by working on the hard things. It's not we unlock our greatness by winning the prize. We unlock our greatness by working on the hard things. So it's like in doing the work that the magic happens.
Yeah. Again, I encourage everybody to pick up the book. I've got my copy here.
Beautiful. Thank you. I love seeing that. It's so new out in the world. It's like 2 weeks out in the world that it's seeing people holding the book up. I'm like, yes, that's so exciting.
Yeah. Made it all the way to Minnesota from Toronto. So
yeah, exactly. I'll celebrate that.
Yeah. Well, outside of work, what do you like to do to recharge?
I'm a huge reader. I'm married to a woman who trained as a librarian and has a PhD in literature. So we read a lot and pretty eclectically, science fiction, young adult, nonfiction, science books, business books, self-help books. So I do a lot of reading. I'm a very poor ukulele player. So I have a ukulele by my desk and I practice it on a kind of pretty regular basis. And I'm still terrible at it, but it's actually, it's nice for me who,
that's great.
I'm old enough, I'm in my early 50s that I kind of do a bunch of stuff that I'm pretty good at. I figured out what it is, and I spend most of my time working in stuff that makes me look good. And when I play ukulele and I play it in my classes, I'm like, nobody thinks Michael's a star here. Michael is definitely the rank amateur as he learns ukulele.
That's great. Well, you're the first guest I've had on that's played a little ukulele, which is a first. So
I tell you, one of the cool things in my life, the book in between, The Coaching Habit, which you held up and that sold the millions of copies, and this new book, How to Begin, is a book called The Advice Trap, which is a deeper dive into behavior change and why is it so hard to resist giving advice. And I recorded the audiobook. It's the first audiobook that I've recorded, read my own book. And in between each chapter, I play the ukulele. I just play a chord. Okay. And I'm like, see, I have a professional ukulele recording out there in the world. It's not much. I'm unlucky to win a Grammy for it, but I can say I've got some music on tape.
There you go. Well, what parting advice would you give our listeners thinking about leaders that maybe are in their first leadership role? What advice would you give them?
First leadership role in particular, I think you suffer anxiety around, I don't know enough. You're like, I was just getting the hang of this job and now I've been promoted to actually leading people. I definitely don't know all the stuff that other people are doing. And you can be pretty worried about that gap in expertise. And one possibility for you is to reframe that to go, actually, that's a superpower. Your ignorance means that you have to ask good questions because you can't possibly have the answer around that. And it turns out that staying curious a little longer is one of the great leadership superpowers. So use your lack of knowledge and your lack of experience as a way to kind of judo flip, to say, this is how I develop a more coach-like approach to being a leader.
Well, I wish we had another hour to talk today, but I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk to us. And I know this is going to be helpful for those listeners, and wish you continued success.
Thank you, man. It was nice to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.